What's up, you guys? Stoopzz back again, and today I'm bringing you a Shadow Priest PvP guide for 7.2. Alright, you guys, Stoopzz back again with another video, and today I'm going to bring you a quick Shadow Priest PvP overview, a PvP guide. Many people on the stream have been asking me to make a quick guide on this. I know there's not that many guides out there for Shadow Priest, so this will just be a general guide. What this guide will entail is it will include my general talents, my honor talents. I'll go over some tips and tricks that I think are, worth noting when playing a Shadow Priest, and then I will also go over some standard arena comps that I think you guys can implement when trying to play the Shadow Priest. Sorry I've been away for a little bit. If you haven't caught on to my live stream, I just got done with finals, so that's why there's been a little bit of a delay in my videos. Been busy with school, and I'm back on the grind now, and you guys can catch me on my live stream a lot more often, as well as expect more videos to come. So just starting off with our honor talents, I'm going to go through these very quickly. I want to make this guide quick and condensed. You'll see here that I always opt for Twist of Fate. I never opt for anything else like Fortress of the Mind or Shadow Word Void. I think Twist of Fate is great. It's just going to increase your damage output. It kind of puts in that execute style of gameplay, and it works really well with Shadow Word Death. Next, you're going to go to Body and Soul. This just increases the movement speed, or your movement speed, or your allies' movement speed when you activate Power Word Shield. It's really good for that mobility. Sometimes you need that to get around pillars or kind of kite away, or you're trying to assist your healer from getting trained. You can give them that movement speed, and that's why I opt for Body and Soul. Psychic Voice and Mind Bomb, these are both great options. Mind Bomb is really great when you're trying to stun somebody up. You can also use it to peel really well. Psychic Scream really breaks quite often, to be honest. It's really good for setting up longer CC chains, like a Fear Bomb into a Poly, or Poly out of Fear Bomb. I really like that. Most of the time I do opt for Psychic Voice, but I found a lot of utility in Mind Bomb, and a lot of the times at a lower MMR you will see that the enemy healer will not dispel Mind Bomb. You have to really look for it, and especially if you're not using big debuffs, it's hard to look for Mind Bomb. So both great options. Just see what you like the best, but these are the two options in the level 45 general talent bracket. Next, I'll opt for Reaper of Souls. I almost always use Reaper of Souls. It just makes it so Shadow Word Death is castable on targets that are 35% in health and below, and it generates insanity. But again, it works really well with Twist of Fate. You can spam it twice back to back when the person hits 35% health, and you can deal a lot of damage, especially when you're in your Void form, and we'll get to that a little bit later. For level 75, I almost always opt for Sand Lane. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It just increases the damage of your Vampiric Touch by 20% and the healing of your Vampiric Embrace by 20%. This is really helpful for your healers, great for battlegrounds, and it's just good for your overall sustainability. They did nerf this a couple patches ago, but it's still very powerful and still my #1 choice for level 75. For level 90, I always opt for Misery. It just makes it so that when you apply your Vampiric Touch, you will also apply Shadow Word Pain. It just makes it easy when you're trying to spread your dot damage. You don't have to apply both. You always go this talent. So level 90 Misery increases your damage output, makes it a lot easier to sustain dots, and I find it to be very useful. Now for level 100, people used to use Shadow Crash, and I think Shadow Crash was great when you were using Edge of Insanity, but now that you're not, you want to be able to use Legacy of the Void, because Void Eruption can now be cast when your Insanity level is 65 or higher versus it being at a higher level, and it increases the damage of Void Form by additional 5%. So it works really well now that you are using your Void Form, obviously. Shadow Crash was great when you were using Edge of Insanity, but now that we're no longer using that talent, I prefer Legacy of the Void. Now, top right into our honor talents here, we have Gladiator's Medallion, Adaptation, and Relentless. Relentless is okay. Almost never opt for Adaptation unless you're like a human or something like that, but I prefer Gladiator's Medallion. Unless you know you're going to be getting CC'd quite heavily, which is most likely not the case. You will probably be getting trained most often when you are playing as a Shadow Priest, so I always opt for Gladiator's Medallion. Train of Thought is not a good talent for this next bracket, just because you always are taking damage. You're never going to be sitting in the back unless it's like a battleground, and even in that case, you probably still will be taking a lot of damage during that. So I always opt for Mind Quickness, just giving me that 6% haste, increasing my damage output as well as my cast time. When I first started out for this next bracket, I used to opt for Pure Shadow because I thought, well, Dispersion, I want to be able to reduce the damage I take, and I don't want to lose my Void form, but you don't usually want to use your Disperse when you are in Void form. Pure Shadow just makes it so if you need to activate Power Word Shield, you will heal yourself for 33% of the damage you deal during that time period for 5 seconds. So I always opt for Void Shield. So for this next row, I got a lot of like questions. Hey, how come you don't use Void Origins? Why do you use Driven to Madness? How come you don't use Edge of Insanity anymore? Well, since I think Void Form is still very, very powerful, they did nerf Edge of Insanity. It used to be 25% damage, now I believe it is 20% damage. Thanks for the guild invite. I don't opt for the Edge of Insanity anymore, so you have the choice between Driven to Madness and Void Origins. So Void Origins is great in that it will increase your burst damage because you can instantly get into Void Form, start throwing out your Void Bolts, go into extra shadow damage, and it's just very like, it's a lot of burst potential because you can time your abilities consecutively really easily. However, over a long period of time, you will lose on your damage output because you will not be in Void Form as often. Driven to Madness makes it a lot easier to get in Void Form more consistently. So throughout a long match, over a long period of time, you're going to see that your damage output will be a lot higher with Driven to Madness. And when you are playing Shadow Priest, for the most part, unless you're playing with like a rogue, you are trying to outlast a lot of teams. You work well with Resto Shamans and Warriors and things like that. So Driven to Madness is most likely the better case. However, if you're trying to put out more burst potential, you can't opt for Void Origins. It just makes it so that when you are in Void Form range, you can just instantly apply the ability. I like Driven to Madness, but I have found a lot more burst potential again through Void Origin, so it is optional. This next row, I always go Shadow Mania. It just makes it so having your Vampiric Touch on 2 or more targets, so great for 2s and 3s or BGs, grants you an extra 3 Insanity. You want to get your Insanity rolling, and then it also increases your Vampiric Touch healing by 35%, so it works really well with the previous talents. You want to make sure that you're having your Vampiric Touch at all times. The more healing output you can get, the more sustainability and survivability you have, and you are the focus target for most comps, so you need to have as much sustainability and health regen as possible. For this last row, for the most part, you are going to opt for Void Shift. You and your current target party member can swap health. If the person is below 25% health, they will go to 25% if they are below that amount again. It's really great for overall team utility. It can not only save you, but it can save your allies. Psyfiend does do a lot of damage. You drop the Psyfiend, it drains their health for 2% every 0.8 seconds, and it also reduces their healing received by 50% and their movement speed. However, it just takes 1 auto attack to kill Psyfiend, and Shadow Priest can even Shadow Word Pain that target to kill the Psyfiend. Most high-rated players will see that you're using Psyfiend, and they'll kill it every time it's up. It's optional here. What is this? I don't want to talk to you. You can choose Void Shift or Psyfiend. Void Shift is better for the overall team and increases your survivability. Psyfiend, of course, is going to increase your damage and your kill potential, but it's really easily just destroyed in the opening seconds. So I found that Void Shift is the overall better choice. So now that we've gone over our general talents and our honor talents, I want to go over a couple tips and tricks when playing the Shadow Priest. Number 1, do not spam Power Word Shield all the time because you will yourself. It costs a decent amount of your mana. You do regen your mana pretty quickly, but if you're spamming it over and over off cooldown, you're going to limit the ability or the amount of times you can cast Mass Dispel during a team fight. And this cooldown is very important. Mass Dispel costs a lot of your mana. It's like half your mana, but it can break Paladin bubbles, ice blocks. It can get your allies out of CC. It's also great when you're trying to dispel dots off of your team. It is a great team mechanic. That's why I opt for Void Shift and specific talents because I want to be a team player. Shadow Priests do a lot of damage. It's sustained damage. It's long over the haul, dampen damage. You're trying to kill people over a long period of time and just keep that consistent pressure. So I want to be able to dispel very often. I want to be able to help out my allies with fears and mind controls. Do not spam Power Word Shield off cooldown in arena. In Battlegrounds, even so, I try to use it as sparingly as possible. I'll use it just to get that 33% healing off my damage for that 5-second period off that previous talent that we talked about. So I just like to use Mass Dispel as much as I can. So by spamming Power Word Shield, you limit your ability to do that. Another obvious tip is that when you are building up your damage here, as you can see, I'm just stacking my damage. Try to time your Void Eruption into Void Form with your bigger, splash damage abilities, your Mind Blast, your Shadow Word Death, because you're gonna do increased damage while in Void Form. It increases your damage. Let's see here. It increases your shadow damage by 25%, and we've also increased that through our talents inside of Legacy of the Void, increasing our Void Form shadow damage by an additional 5%. So I just want to make sure that you guys, when you're playing your Shadow Priest, that you're trying to make sure that you're not wasting your Mind Blast and your Shadow Word Deaths outside of Void Eruption. Obviously do it to build up your Void Form, but like right now I'm going to be doing a lot more damage on these abilities versus when I would use them outside of void form. So let's say, for example, you have your void form up, right? You know, your void form is ready to be used and you have mind blast up. Prioritize getting void eruption off first before using your mind blast and shadow word death to increase your shadow damage by 25% or more. On the mass dispel, we just talked about that, but make sure you're using your mass dispel very, very often, okay? It can save you, it can save your allies, it can be used offensively and again defensively to get people out of cyclones, traps. If you want to get rid of a paladin bubble, you can't get 100 deterrents, but you can get a lot of cooldowns off of your the enemy players by mass dispelling, you know, their defensives, or you can use it to cleanse your party and help relieve some pressure for your healer. So make sure you're using your mass dispel as much as possible. That's why I'm telling you not to use power word shield as much. Another important tip is to make sure you're using your mind control quite often, especially on Blade's Edge. You can mind control people off of you. Just look for enemy kicks using Omnibar. You can see when their kicks are used, and then you can opt to cast mind control, and that is very, very useful when jumping people off the bridge or trying to peel for your healer or peel for yourself. Mind control is a very, very powerful cooldown that I recommend that you guys try and implement in your toolkit, and that's why I have it bound here for all 3 enemy arena players, as well as my silence. And I will go over a targeting and macro guide. Hopefully the day after you're watching this video, that macro and targeting guide will be released for all classes, not just the Shadow Priest. Remember, you also have Dispel Magic, where you can dispel beneficial buffs off the enemy player as well as Purify Disease, but this Purge ability is great. You have the Purge and you also have Mass Dispel, so again, a lot of team utility here that you guys should try and take advantage of. Finally, the last tip is just make sure Vampiric Touch is rolling at all times. Make sure you have your enemies bound and you're spamming VTs all times. It always wants to be up to maximize your damage, increase your healing output, and also increase the time you are in void form. Remember that your Void Bolt as well reapplies these dots on the player. So if it's about to fall off, I missed that one, but you can get that Vampiric Touch re-upped in timer. You want to make sure that you're just using your Void Bolt to reset VTs and Shadow Word Pains on enemy players. Alright, you guys, now let's get into the comps. I'm just going to name a few comps. There's a lot of arena comps you guys can play when playing the Shadow Priest. Number 1 off the bat for 2s, you can play Resto Shaman Shadow Priest, Resto Druid Shadow Priest. For 3s, you can play double Shadow Priest Resto Shaman. You can play Shadow Priest, Affliction Warlock Resto Shaman, or Resto Druid or Paladin. The healer doesn't really matter as much in these comps. Resto Shaman does really well with Shadow Priest, but Shamans have been kind of falling off a little bit, so you might opt for a different healer. You can play Rogue Shadow Priest, any healer, usually it's a shaman there. That comp is really aimed at interrupting a lot, using Psyfiend actually in that comp to do a lot of burst. So that's the one case scenario comp where you're not trying to outlast, where you're trying to end the game rather quickly. For the other comps, again, it's a lot of outlasting. Warrior Shadow Priest is really good. Arms Warrior Shadow Priest. God comp being Frost Mage for the most part. Shadow Priest, Druid, or Paladin. Those are all really great comps. You can do Boomkin Shadow Priest. There's a lot of other comps, but the comps I just named there are probably the most popular. I might have missed 1 or 2, but I've had a lot of success playing different comps. It's really fun playing the Shadow Priest, and I highly, highly recommend you guys try it out. Again, this is just a quick guide. I wanted to go over the general talents, the honor talents, to give you guys some quick tips and tricks, and as well as name some comps that I find to be the most successful when playing the Shadow Priest. Alright, you guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you have any more questions regarding the Shadow Priest, you can leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you guys right away. Sorry I've been away for a little bit, but I've been busy with school. But you can expect a lot more content and a lot more streams to come in the next upcoming weeks. Try not to miss me on my YouTube live stream where I answer all of your guys' questions in depth. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.